Hello, my name is Colby Seitz, and today we will be going over the American Civil War. The war happened a long time ago, in 1861 to 1865. That means it has been 156 years since the start of the war. The war that is known to have been between brother versus brother and pitted family against family. The Union fought on one side of the war. The Union was a group of people or places joined together for a political reason. In this case, the Union wanted to keep the country together. In the picture below, the states in blue are the Union states. Most of them are in the north, like New York, Maine, Michigan, Ohio, and more. And it goes all the way down to Pennsylvania. As new states joined the Union, they became blue too. That is why the left side of the map is also blue, like California and Oregon. Union states had a lot of factories where they made different goods. The Confederates were against the Union during the war. They were Confederates because a group of like-minded people joined together and split from the Union. They were fighting to keep slavery because they thought it was their right to own slaves. On the map below, all the states in red are Confederate states. They are all in the southern part of the United States, and include states like Texas, Louisiana, Georgia, Florida, and up to Virginia. The Confederacy was mostly rural states that had farming as their main source of business. The American Civil War was all about slavery. African Americans were being owned by someone else against their will. Some people thought this was wrong, but others thought slavery was okay. The two sides could not agree, and so war happened. This is because the Confederates used slaves to grow their crops, like cotton, rice, and tobacco. The South was making a lot of money not being paid, so their owners could make more money. The slaves lived a harsh life, and so the Union states decided to help them. In the top left is cotton, used to make clothing. In the top right is rice that was grown for food, and at the bottom is tobacco, which was used for recreational purposes. What split the country up was secession. This was the action of all the Confederate states that officially were leaving the Union. The country was split in between two different sides, the red, which was the Confederates, and the blue, which was the Union, with a few border states that could not officially decide. Abraham Lincoln was the United States president during the time of war. To be president, the people picked him to lead them. People thought he was the right person to do a good job. His goal was to keep the country together and to not have a war. However, by 1861, war broke out and the country was never the same again. Lincoln created an army to go fight against the Confederates that wanted to continue slavery. During the war, the Union soldiers wore blue, while the Confederate uniforms were gray. Even though they were on opposite sides, the soldiers had a lot in common. Many soldiers were young males that wanted to leave home in search of adventure, and they saw the war as an escape. Union boys came from big cities of the North, while Confederate boys came from the smaller, rural towns in the South. The war would rage on for 5 long years before the Confederates would eventually give in to the Union troops. Not long after the war, another tragedy would strike the country. John Wilkes Booth was the man that assassinated the president, Abraham Lincoln. He wanted to get revenge by killing Lincoln in a surprise attack. John Wilkes Booth killed President Lincoln while he was at a theater watching a play with his wife and friend. John Wilkes Booth was angry that the Confederates had lost the Civil War and wanted the war to continue. He hoped his assassination attempt would rally the Confederate people around him. However, he was wrong. He was eventually caught by the police and killed for his crimes. After the war, the United States was destroyed from the constant battles of the Union against the Confederates. Now it was time to rebuild. They called it Reconstruction because the people were rebuilding their buildings and towns after they were destroyed, especially in the Confederate States where most of the fighting had occurred. Reconstruction is also about how the country came back together instead of being Union and Confederate. Everyone was now Americans. It would now be President Johnson who would be in charge of leading the people. As president, Johnson would see the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments be passed into law. An amendment is a change and addition to the Constitution. These three amendments were added to the Civil War after the Civil War, and they deal with people's rights. Mostly, it made slavery illegal in that African Americans have the same equal rights as any other person. Some people were not ready for these changes, and so the struggle for African American civil rights would continue even up until today. Thank you for listening, and I hope you have a better understanding of the American Civil War.